Good afternoon, and welcome back to HealthLeaders The Winning Edge program, a weekly series of webinars touching on the topics and strategies that you need to know most. My name is Jay Asser. I'm the CEO editor for HealthLeaders and will serve as your moderator for this session. Today's webinar is titled The Winning Edge for Cybersecurity. Thank you to you and our audience for participating and joining us. Before we get started, for those of you participating in the live program, I just have a few housekeeping details to go over. Note that an on-demand version of this program will be available on our YouTube channel on Friday and can be accessed through our website at healthleadersmedia.com. To ensure that you can see all the content for the event, please maximize your event window and be sure to adjust your computer volume settings and/or PC speakers for optimal sound quality. Next, you'll find a resources list for today's webinar on the upper right of your screen. Here we have listed the webinar slide deck and some additional materials for you to download, along with a registration link for future The Winning Edge programs. At the bottom of your console are multiple widgets that you can use. To submit a question, click on the Q&A widget. It may be open already and appear on the left side of your screen. You may submit questions at any time during the presentation. However, please note that it is likely that your questions will not be answered until the Q&A portion of the program at the end. Finally, should you experience any technical difficulties during today's program and need assistance, please click on the Help widget, which has a question mark icon and covers most common technical issues. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker for today's discussion. I want to welcome Jeremy Davis, President and CEO of Grande Ronde Hospital. Jeremy, thank you so much for being here. Could you first please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your organization?
Well, first off, thanks for having me, and it's an honor to be a part of this. And I think the topic is very timely. So, a little bit about me: been the president and CEO here at Grande Ronde Hospital and Clinics for 7 years. Just celebrated 7 years back in November. Was born and raised about 35 miles southeast of here. We're an independent hospital. We're critical access. Here in Eastern Oregon, and obviously a lot of concerns about rural hospitals and rural stability, and especially in light of HR1, which I think means that the topic that we're talking about today in terms of cybersecurity is even more important.
Yeah, for sure. I think, as you said, this is a timely topic and one that is at the forefront for many hospital leaders right now. As we know, data breaches are becoming all too common against hospitals, and incidents are turning into a when, not if event. So I just want to first start by asking Jeremy, what has changed in this healthcare landscape over the past few years that is making these cyber incidents more common, especially towards hospitals and health systems?
Yeah. Definitely, there's been a shift, and I think, really it's become much more professional and organized. It's not just a matter of lone actors, but seem to be kind of well-funded groups, and so it seems very business-like. We're also seeing far more supply chain and service provider attacks, where threat actors compromise a vendor or a cloud service. And then those obviously move downstream. Many hospitals will rely on vendors and third parties to be able to offer the services and for all the data and all of the systems that we operate. And so when those systems become compromised, then it obviously impacts us as well. And the barriers to entry have dropped as well. The tools and exploit kits are widely available. And you throw in artificial intelligence on top of that, that has made phishing and social engineering even more complex and more difficult. In fact, just had a situation today where an invoice came in and had made it look like I had been emailing back and forth with this vendor, and then they sent in an invoice hoping to get paid. And so very much it's not a matter of if, but when, and it's become much more complex and much more organized.
Yeah, I think we're seeing this across all industries right now, where if you're a big business, you are under the threat of a breach, a cyber attack right now. Um, and you touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the unique aspects of hospitals that are making that make them attractive to these bad actors and make them more vulnerable to some of these events?
Yeah, healthcare data is extremely valuable. Medical records are worth many times more than credit card numbers on the black market and can be used for long-term identity theft and fraud. We we operate complex, interconnected networks and environments, oftentimes with legacy systems and medical devices that often can't be patched quickly. And then, in healthcare, we have a pretty low tolerance for downtime. Patients don't stop showing up. Births still happen, emergencies still happen. And so there's a real urgency and a real, just real urgency placed on healthcare providers, given that we have a data-rich environment that make us very attractive to threat actors.
And how is the mindset shifting for many leaders right now? Of course, you still value preventative measures to get ahead of these attacks, stop them from happening in the first place. But because of how inevitable they seem to be right now, how is the mindset shifting to that recovery aspect? And how do you try to look at your post incident recovery plan as a priority?
Yeah, yeah. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there at the beginning. Obviously, just like in our own health and wellness, prevention is key. But no organization can block every attack. And I think really recovery is the most critical piece. The mindset, I think, for CEOs and administrators isn't so much of how do we prevent attacks, it's how do we get back up quickly and continue to fulfill our mission and take care of our patients and our staff and our community. I think this, inherently is about thinking ahead. How do you minimize the downtime? How do you maintain operations? How do you limit the overall impact? And this really isn't just an IT issue in my mind. It really impacts the entire organization and in the community and the broader public. And I think CEOs and leaders and administrators, we play a critical role in ensuring the organization is organized and prepared so we can respond and recover and continue serving patients. So I think really, if you would ask me this question, I think 5 years ago or 7 years ago or 10 years ago, I think it was all around prevention. But lately, it seems like we're trying to figure out how can we get our operations back up as quickly as possible? How can we leverage our business continuity plans and emergency preparedness efforts to be able to take care of the community that relies on us when they need us most?
And we'll get into some of these practices, both on the prevention side and the response side as we go on through our conversation today. But I do want to ask you also from a CEO perspective. I know cybersecurity is not something that is what you want to be thinking about, right? You're dealing with tight margins, trying to think of ways to better deliver care. So you have to rely also on your executive team, your CIO, CISO. How do you keep the communication with the rest of your executive team? What are the questions you need to be asking them to ensure that the organization is in a position to be ready to respond to any type of cyber incident?
Yeah. I'll tell you, I'll even take it a step further. It really starts at your board of trustees, at a governance level. Making sure that your board is well informed and is willing to support the efforts both administratively and financially. In terms of, I think, important questions for us is we look at our varied systems and we understand, what the patches are, what are the vulnerabilities, what are the recent upgrades or future upgrades that need to happen. We're constantly reevaluating our technology and our equipment, making sure is it up to date, is it current. Obviously when financial situations are dire, it's hard to invest in things like this. And the reality is I don't think you can avoid investing. It's almost imperative, because if these systems aren't functioning, you're just not going to exist. You're not going to be able to operate. You're not going to be able to fulfill your mission. So I think for me, it starts with frequent meetings with our CIO, with our chief informatics officer, with our security professionals. We routinely have an outside entity come and do an audit. Because again, I think as in most things in life, you can get comfortable with your own processes and your own infrastructure, thinking that you've got things well maintained. So it's always nice to have somebody from the outside that can come take a look. Some of these programs are, obviously you have to pay for. I think Homeland Security might have some programs that organizations can tap into. So that might be a viable resource for folks that are kind of wondering where to start. Sometimes they will also do tabletop exercises at organizations to help organizations like us and other healthcare providers be prepared for a cyber incident, and also start helping you think through, again, the recovery phase of that as well.
All right, so let's kind of do a scenario here, not to get your anxiety up, but let's say a cyber attack happens right now. You as the CEO, what are your first responsibilities, your initial responsibilities in the first day or two of responding to that? And what are you doing around your decision making to ensure that your operations aren't going to be down and completely obsolete right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think our first priority is always going to be our patients and our staff, and that continuity of care, and the privilege and honor it is to serve the community. And we're still a hospital. Our mission doesn't change during an incident or an emergency. So I think that's really kind of mission number one, is just make sure that we're continuing to focus on patient care. But really, it's around a rapid assessment of activating pre-planned responses, business continuity procedures, downtime workflows, especially for electronic medical records, imaging, revenue cycle need to be put into quick motion. This also includes paper and manual processes. One of the good things, I think, for everybody that's on an electronic health record is that, often there's typically planned downtimes throughout the year, and sometimes several times a month, as there's various upgrades to these systems. And so some of our departments are very versed and adept at downtime procedures, like our emergency department and so forth, especially our 24-hour services. And so really, when it comes to preparing for a cyber attack and recovery, it's those departments that don't have, that aren't dealing with downtimes as frequently. They're the ones that you want to especially, focus your attention on in terms of drills and tabletops and so on and so forth. But really, I think CEO's job in any type of incident is to, coordinate leadership, support decision-making while under pressure, and engaging external partners such as vendors, legal counsel, state and federal agencies, as part of a response and as appropriate.
As we know, when a cyber incident happens, a data breach happens, that can create a lot of confusion. It can create a lot of distrust initially, not just with patients and the public, but within maybe your own building with your own staff, clinicians. So what are some of the ways that you can communicate with those people, both in your building and outside, to ensure that, to assure them a little bit that, okay, we're dealing with this. We understand that there's a breach, and maybe, personal data could be vulnerable, but we're acting on this right now, and
Yeah.
to build back some of that trust.
Yeah, really, I think clear and concise communications is critical in this situation. I think, first and foremost, I think the general public and the community need to know that, hospitals, we plan for these things all the time, whether, downtime procedures, emergency is part of our incident planning process. So obviously, until a real incident happens, there's always going to be some nuances, but we're constantly thinking about, whether it's going to be a cyber attack, whether it's a mass casualty event, so on and so forth. So we think and plan for these things all the time. And so, I think the general public and the community hopefully can have some trust in that. And obviously, I think during a situation, you want to remind folks of that preparedness and that planning that we constantly go through. But really, I think leadership should focus on simple, honest, and empathetic messaging. When all the facts aren't yet known, I think inconsistent or conflicting messaging can quickly undermine confidence. And I think those first couple hours of any incident are always kind of the most chaotic, because you're still gathering a lot of facts, a lot of information, and so I think it's important that that message is clear and consistent both internally within the organization as well as externally to the general public. And then obviously at that time you're probably going to start getting media requests. You're going to start getting interest from potentially law enforcement or federal officials or public officials, and so again trying to navigate those communication channels. And obviously you activate your incident command structure and leverage your PIO and leverage the command system to try to disseminate information as quickly and efficiently and concisely as possible. But really, I think designating a single spokesperson is critical in that situation, and that's the beauty of the command structure and a public information officer to kind of help that communication to hopefully not erode trust and build that confidence and remind folks that we're here and able to serve their healthcare needs.
And how have you seen some of these tabletop exercises really evolving in recent years? And what are some of the ways that you think they can really build that organizational resilience to cyber incidents?
Yeah. I think what's neat is, often as I think about my career, we often talk about preparing for that mass casualty event or a train derailment. And we're finding that more and more of our tabletops and planning exercises are around cybersecurity and downtime procedures. And so our frontline staff have become much more open and much more involved and interested in participating in these events, which I think is very, very encouraging. One thing that we're actually doing right now, our CIO is actually is in talks with actually another hospital system to, I think, be a part of their tabletop exercise virtually. So that way there's some cross-pollination of ideas, so we can see how another organization kind of goes through their tabletop exercise, and so we can kind of learn from that and improve our tabletop experience. And I think that's going to probably start to snowball where others are going to maybe want to participate in ours, and so that I think that that collaboration amongst hospitals and provider groups is very much important, because a smaller hospital is going to have different challenges than a large urban hospital. And so, participating in each other's tabletops, I think, and especially now that we've got all this technology and folks are a lot more comfortable as a result of the pandemic of using video conferencing and technology to support each other and learn from each other so we can improve those tabletops. Culturally, a resilient organization treats cybersecurity as a patient safety issue. And so staff, really feel comfortable reporting concerns and participating in these preparedness efforts, kind of like I mentioned at the beginning. And so, cross-functional teams, business continuity plans, having those reviewed annually, pulling those out during your tabletop exercises, I think have really strengthened our ability to better respond. And then there's external agencies as well. And in fact, our board of trustees attended a conference, I think it was last year. And that conference session actually had a special breakout session on cybersecurity. And I actually kind of went through a real scenario. And so it was kind of neat for me and a couple of our executives, along with several of our board officers and board members, to be at the same table as well. We were at a table with some other folks that weren't part of our organization. And we kind of went through a tabletop exercise and got us thinking. And we were able to bring some of those ideas back here to improve our processes.
We had someone submit a question I think might be worth addressing right now. They ask, how is the emergence of AI really affecting a lot of your cybersecurity defenses right now? I was talking at one of our health leaders exchanges last year. A CIO from a big health system was talking about how a lot of the executive team members at his organization, they would often get phone calls where AI is mimicking a person, a human being. And those are really, it's getting to a point where it's really hard to discern what's real and what's not. And you're almost, as what he was saying is, you almost have to kind of pull back from your reliance on technology and go back to human level, human interactions where, you have almost a secret password you say to each other, for example, something like that. So I'm just wondering how you've encountered maybe some of the emergence of AI and how that's affecting a lot of your either exercises you're doing or, prevention to kind of get ahead of these trends.
Yeah. So, really AI, I think has a lot of promise, but as you alluded to, it also has a lot of challenges and risks to it. So certainly, many of our vendors, I'm almost certain, are using AI as part of helping be proactive in terms of defense and, kind of alerting them of potential threats to various systems. We've been using AI as part of kind of phishing campaigns within our own organization as kind of tests. And it was interesting, once we turned on AI, we saw our click rate go up. And, because the AI is becoming much more sophisticated. And so the tests that we're sending to our employees are becoming more and more real. The good news is then through additional education and communication and so on and so forth, we've seen that rate then come back to normal. And so, it's spooky. I've seen one situation where a company was able to make a video that pretty much mimicked my voice and made it look like me, like I was talking. And so, it's hard to kind of differentiate between reality and what's virtual these days. And so you're right. I think we're all busy. And so really I think it's taking a step back and pausing, looking at the message, looking at, or if you're on the phone, is this a topic, or is this a call I was expecting? Is there urgency that they're putting on the situation? And just try to use some of that common sense. And then, we always tell our folks, if you're in doubt, then call our security analysts and let them evaluate it before you click or before you react or before you respond. So, but great question. AI, I think, has a lot of promise to help us better detect and mitigate and kind of go through preventative measures, but it's also going to ramp up the actual threats themselves because they'll become more sophisticated.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a lot of trying to fight fire with fire in these cases. And I mean, of course, we're talking a lot about, what what you can do for your organization to best prepare it. But a lot of it comes down to, as we know, the resources you have available, the capital you have available to fund a lot of these investments. And you're a great example at a rural hospital in Oregon there. You're, again, working with tight margins and trying to do your best just to serve your community as best as you can, as long as you can, and might not have the same resources available as a big health system in an urban market, right? So then you look at towards regulators and you look at policy. So I'm just wondering, what are some ways that you feel like the levers there can be pulled to help with some of the resources when it comes to some of these smaller organizations or smaller rural organizations that maybe don't have the same money to throw to solving some of these cybersecurity issues?
Yeah. Not every hospital can, achieve the same level of technical sophistication as you kind of alluded to, but, having clear, achievable baseline standards, I think makes a big difference. I remember early in my career, one of my mentors, they said, you can't tame it unless you name it. And so you got to have a good understanding of your baseline situation before you can start mapping a roadmap to strengthen your infrastructure and your defense per se. I think policies that focus on outcomes such as identity protection, backups, patching, incident reporting are far more helpful than mandates to buy specific tools. There are grants, reimbursements, or incentives tied to cybersecurity preparedness that could also significantly help smaller and rural hospitals. My personal opinion is, I think cybersecurity probably needs to be a matter of national security. Right now, every hospital and every medical practice is kind of left to figure it out on their own. And so I do think, in terms of a policy decision, I think making it a matter of national security would probably bring a lot better infrastructure and coordination versus kind of a patchwork of each health system or each hospital doing kind of their own thing. Stronger expectations around vendor security, transparency, and patching, along with clear contractual liability standards, could reduce downstream risk. Shared threat intelligence is always important, and collaborative resources. Even though we're an independent rural hospital, we are part of various groups with other rural hospitals where we can share learnings around cybersecurity and others. So I think really leaning out to others is important. But just as important is encouraging organizations to assess their current state, learn from peers and leverage relationships across the healthcare community. I think many hospitals are eager to share their lessons learned, so you want to tap into that. So, but yeah, definitely, having that baseline, I think, is critical, so you can kind of map out your plan and develop a roadmap for how you can strengthen your response and resiliency.
And just last question that I want to ask you is, looking forward now, and we've talked a lot about some of the ways you can best position your organization to be resilient, but what do you think are going to be those capabilities in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years that are going to separate the hospitals and health systems that can respond to these cyber threats and do it, in a way that is going to be successful versus those that might struggle a little bit more?
Yeah. I think organizations that practice their incident response, they test their disaster recovery, they train their staff, and they understand their own weaknesses are going to be able to recover faster and with less disruption. I think it's just simple. You have to practice. You have to have almost that kind of muscle memory. Regular downtime drills. In a culture where cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility matters just as much as technology. I know one of the things that we do here, I hold 3 or 4 times a year, we do CEO forums or CEO town halls, which I'm sure many folks at their organizations, their CEOs do those as well. We've typically once or twice a year, as part of those CEO forums, I do give time to our CIO to talk about cybersecurity. So, really giving cybersecurity that visibility that it's important, and I think is going to help celebrate or help separate organizations in terms of their preparedness and their ability to recover more quickly. But strong third-party incident response support is going to be important where feasible. Modern endpoint and detection tools to help contain threats more quickly. And ultimately, fast recovery protects patient safety and operational stability, financial health, and public trust. And so, again, this really isn't about just cybersecurity. This really is a patient safety issue, and organizations need to think of it that way and be prepared to put forth the effort and the resources to be ready.
Great. Well, thanks, Jeremy, again, for an excellent discussion. This brings us now to the Q&A portion of the program. So we would again like to invite you to ask any live questions for our speaker. As a reminder, if you're participating in the live program, to submit a question, click on the Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen. It may be open already and appear on the left side of your screen. Please note that your question will remain anonymous and will not be viewed by other audience members. We have time to sneak in a question here, but someone asked, obviously right now, workforce is a big issue for hospital CEOs, and you're thinking of how can you recruit and retain clinicians. But on the side, if we look at it from a cybersecurity lens, what are some roles or skills that you want to bring into your organization and hire for to help to make you a more resilient organization when it comes to cybersecurity?
Yeah, again, I think as kind of this, kind of chat has kind of illustrated, the world of cybersecurity has become more complex. And I think if you go back 10, 15, 20 years ago, most organizations probably had a pretty thin, pretty small group of staff that were focused on cybersecurity. And not to say it wasn't important, but it just wasn't as resourced. And I think we've all become more aware that it's not something that you can just take for granted and hope really isn't a strategy. And so definitely, I think, we have a dedicated security analyst. We have other staff members that are cross-trained. They often go to various conferences or do other, training modules online to make sure they're staying abreast. We're actually pretty fortunate here that we've got a small university in our small town, and so we often have some of the students that are going into information technology and information services. Oftentimes we'll do some shadowing here. And so I think that's a great opportunity for some of these early professionals to learn, through our culture and through our practices, the importance of cybersecurity, so that hopefully if, as they get hired on somewhere else, that they're bringing that mindset and that skill set and hopefully maybe that competency to strengthen the organizations where they go to work. I think cybersecurity and cyber preparedness, really isn't a luxury anymore. It's a must-have. And so, again, I think it goes back to the previous question. Just make sure you have a good baseline of where your strengths and your weaknesses and your opportunities are, so that way you can determine, what staff, what competencies, what skills you're going to need to be in a position to better respond and better protect your organization.
And we have just one more question here before we wrap up. Someone asks, how do you go about assessing potential partnerships with vendors and third parties to aid you with and bring them in to help with your cybersecurity defenses? And even maybe going a step further, how do you ensure that or assess whether those vendors or third parties are maybe potentially bringing a cyber security risk, further risk into your organization?
Yeah. Couple of thoughts there. It's a great question. I think for us, being an independent hospital, we have to often, we do our own assessments and analysis. Really have to trust our frontline staff as they are experts in this field and in these topics, and they kind of know who seems to have what it takes and who doesn't. They know the vendors, they know the folks that seem to be doing a good job. They also attend conferences and have opportunities to network with other folks. And so you'll often hear of certain firms and certain vendors that just always seem to be brought up. And so you start to build that, like, all right, it sounds like a lot of folks are using these folks. So then you can start doing your due diligence. But always, many of these vendors are going to have certain credentials. They're going to have certain, things that are going to help you assess their capacity and their capabilities, and that they truly do have the tools and resources to meet your needs. But for me, as a CEO, I'm not an expert on the technical things. I know enough to be dangerous. So I really have to rely on our CIO and our information security analysts and other members of our team, who they eat and breathe and live this world, and they often know who's credible and who's not. But yeah, it's hard because there's, with AI, I think there's a lot of promise, and I'm sure others. I get a lot of emails from folks promising all kinds of great tools and solutions with AI. Really, it comes back to, I think, relationships and connection with other hospitals and systems to, learn how are they doing it. Because again, I think that's the problem. Without a national framework, it's kind of a patchwork. So I think the more that you can learn from others and align, you kind of build a better defense.
Great. That's all the time we have for questions today. In closing, please note that our Winning Edge program on January 27th will cover the Winning Edge for defeating denials. A live clickable link will appear at the close of this program, taking you to our registration page for that event. Remember to follow along all week for continued coverage on cybersecurity on this session by visiting our website at healthleadersmedia.com. I want to thank Jeremy Davis once again for an excellent discussion. And finally, thank you to you and our audience for participating. We hope you enjoyed today's program and look forward to seeing you during our next Winning Edge program on defeating denials.